What's up, everyone, and welcome to the 16th episode of the Control Freak Podcast. I am your host, Alex Blackard, or @LessAlex on Twitter. Make sure to follow me there to stay updated with all my going-ons and to see when the podcast is posted. This is a weekly podcast, so every single Monday morning you can wake up to the podcast. The podcast is proudly sponsored by Team Solitary Pro. Thank you to them. They give me the ability to play in a bunch of tournaments and give me the ability to do this podcast. So thank you to Team Solitary Pro. And as always, this podcast is on basically all of the podcast apps. So Stitcher, Podbean, all of them. Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. And if you do enjoy this podcast, enjoy this kind of content, it would be a huge, huge help of you if you would go on over to Apple Podcasts. You don't even need an account on Apple Podcasts to do this either. So you can go on over there, give me a 5-star review. It goes a very, very long way with like how they rank their podcasts and everything. Go on over there, give me a 5-star review and say just a couple of, you could be like 3 words, this podcast good or whatever. But if you could go on over there and give me some kind words, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Anyways, now that all that housekeeping stuff is pretty much all done, welcome. Today's episode, it's going to be a little bit different. The first part of it, going to talk about a subject that I think a lot of modern players, specifically right now, including myself, are struggling with. And that's like knowing to pick a deck in this wide open meta. You know, basically what to do when you don't know what to do in Magic. This is something that I've been personally struggling with for basically since the banning. So we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, there were several big modern tournaments this weekend. There was GP Ghent was a team tournament. And then there was, of course, the SCG Classic, which, that's a classic. So there was, several hundred players in that. And that's, of course, a pretty big tournament. That's basically what we're going to talk about. Blue-White didn't have a great showing this weekend overall. So basically the first thing I want to talk about, and this is something pretty close to hits pretty close to home here, because I have since the unbanning of Stoneforge Mystic and the ban of Hogak and Faithless Looting, it's obviously shaken up the format a bunch, an insane amount. And a lot of people are kind of reeling over the fact that Hogak and Faithless Looting are gone. A lot of people lost their decks. But on the flip side of that, us blue-white mages got a new tool, and the format really did slow down. So there's something to rejoice in that vein of things. But honestly, it's really tough right now. Like, if you're devoted to playing Control, which, if you're listening to this podcast and you've been listening to it for a while, it's mostly a Control-based podcast. It is a modern podcast, but through the lens of a Control player, a Control player's eyes. So I really wanted to try Stoneforge Mystic, and since it started putting up a bunch of results, I definitely wanted to give it a shot. But of course, I'm missing some of the key cards that Stoneforge decks really just aren't playing because of the Stoneforge package. So for things like Narset Parter of Veils and even Supreme Verdict, like cutting Supreme Verdicts, I played in an IQ today, and I played one Supreme Verdict main. After playing the tournament, I ended up losing my winning in, so unfortunately didn't get there, but Supreme Verdict just didn't seem correct. I talked with my teammate, Tony Johnson, who's on Team Solitary Pro. He suggested playing a 4th copy of Force of Negation, and I I did not listen to him, and multiple times in the tournament, of course, I needed Force of Negation. There was a scenario where I needed to opt into Force of Negation, and didn't get there either time. So maybe a fourth would have proven to be better than that Supreme Verdict. It's a weird feeling for me too, because I actually tested pretty much all week. I tested this awesome Devoted Devastation deck. I know that there's no islands in that deck. I felt just dirty doing it. But I tested that deck all week. Mickey Humphreys, another teammate of mine on Solitary Pro, who actually top 16'd SCG Dallas with that deck, with Devoted Devastation, got me onto it. And I tested it a bunch, and I really just couldn't pull the trigger on the deck, mostly because it didn't feel right. I got into scenarios where I would have a bunch of creatures, and they would have a bunch of creatures, and I was just like looking at this board state like, man, I wish I had a Supreme Verdict to clear up all this mess. But so I elected to not play that this weekend. I don't regret not. I don't regret not playing it or anything like that, but I'm still kind of torn between what to do. One thing that Joey Pasco of Yo MTG Taps podcast, you should check that out. It's a great podcast. One thing he and I were talking about on Twitter was that you should just, when a new format starts, which is basically what we're dealing with right now, an unsolved format, you should basically lock into a deck, which that's a huge problem for me. I'm torn right now between, do I want to go with Stoneblade or do I want to go with Blue-White Control? And this is something that me and Harry Koo talked about last episode, but I just wanted to expand on it even more just because I'm still up in the air. I don't know what's better. Stoneblade, of course, has been putting up better results, but I've seen people doing well with Control. So I'm torn really between, do I, and you know, this is, of course, I'm speaking as a vessel of many people I've heard on Twitter and just in person as well, on whether they want to go with the new Stoneforge package or if they want to go with traditional Control. So when I say I'm speaking, I'm trying to facilitate other people's thoughts as well. So I think that a lot of blue-white players right now are just kind of lost. There was, of course, that awesome Jeskai Geist deck that ended up top 8ing the GP, or it won. Yeah, it won the GP last weekend. And that was a sweet deck. But I actually did, I ended up getting it on Magic Online, and I played it a couple of matches, and I just wasn't feeling the Mother of Runes. I wasn't feeling the Giver of Runes too much. That plan was fine, but I don't know, just not my playstyle. Not my playstyle. Love Guys of St. Traft, but yeah, I just couldn't. I couldn't get behind that, and only playing 20 lands, that was pretty low on the land count. I was not comfortable playing a tempo deck even with that few of lands. So yeah, I played Blue-White Stoneblade at the IQ today. I'll post the list and everything online. I think the list was pretty good. I think the main deck was probably 59 cards correct. I would have swapped out a Supreme Verdict for probably the 4th Force of Negation. And I could be super biased because 2 of my matches literally came down to me needing Force of Negation, so I could be super biased, probably just actually super, super duper biased. But, I mean, damn, I really needed them. So I would have cut that, and at no point was I in danger of just like dying to just a horde of creatures. I played against Burn twice. I played against Jund twice. And I played against Infect. So all pretty reasonable matchups. I don't know if any of them are necessarily favored. I think Jund, is pretty favored post-board. It's pretty even, though. All those matchups are pretty even. If you don't have the removal spell at the right time for Infect, you could just die out of nowhere, of course. So, but yeah, I think the 59 cards were good. I think, and then in the sideboard, I had Disenchant or Nature's Chant. I couldn't find a Disenchant, but I didn't bring it in ever. Though I didn't play against like Wurza or anything, so obviously that's something to take note of. But yeah, I think I would have moved the Supreme Verdict to the sideboard and taken out Nature's Chant, just because Nature's Chant is fine, or Disenchant. Those style effects are fine, but of course, I mean, Supreme Verdict is a card that has game-breaking possibilities, and Disenchant I don't think necessarily has that. The floor for both of those cards is pretty low too. So I understand what people are telling me on Twitter and what people are telling me in person too. There's like, Alex, I'm lost. I don't know what to do right now. The metagame is just such a hodgepodge. I do think that there is I think Burn's very good right now. I think that Wurza is excellent. Obviously, against Burn, we bring in things like Timely Reinforcements, things like you could play a second Batter Skull if you're playing Stoneblade in the sideboard. I've seen people doing that. So that's the game plan against Burn. Excuse me. You could do all of these things. And then against Wurza, obviously Disenchant, Stony Silence, things like that are excellent against them. And then I also really like Jund. Jund is excellent right now. It's a grind fest. It really does 100% of the time almost, it seems, comes down to the top deck. And you really just, I think this is where kind of Control does have the upper hand. You just have so many haymakers late in the game against Jund that if you're playing in a Jund heavy format, I personally, and I know not everybody's going to agree with me on this, but I truly do believe that Blue-White Control is better than Stoneblade against Jund specifically. Narset is excellent against them, being able to find all the one-ofs, being able to find. I was playing Winds of Abandon. I love that card. I'm here for that card. So being able to find that card, I mean, that can just end a game. If they have like 3 creatures out and you just Winds of Abandon them, game over. Not necessarily, but it's a huge feather in the cap of Blue-White for sure. So yeah, and that's a deck that I would play too. Jund is an excellent deck, and very similar to Blue-White, where we want to draw cards, they want to just make their opponent discard cards. So very, very good deck. But yeah, let me know if you are at a loss on what to play in Modern. Hit me up on Twitter, at LessAlex. Let's talk about it, because I've been talking with people basically since the banning, and people shouting me out and stuff, talking about what should I play, Control or Stoneblade. It's honestly, I think it's really up to your play style, whatever you want. I would try Stoneblade if you're coming over from Control, like I did. I don't know. I don't think anyone does. Anyone that says that they know which one's better, they're probably, feeding you a line, because honestly, this format is still super fresh. There's been like maybe 5 tournaments total that we have data from. Of course, we have the 5-0 list, and those are great to start with, but ultimately the GPs, the SCGs, those are going to be the things to look at on what is actually happening in the format, because I don't want to sound like that person, but anything can 5-0 a league. You never know, especially since they combined the leagues. They used to have friendly leagues and they used to have competitive leagues. Now they only have just modern leagues. So you have no idea what that person who 5-0'd, what that person played against. Now in a 15-round tournament, that is some data. So, but yeah, let me know. Are you struggling, or do you know? Do you think you have it solved? Either way, let me know. Of course, this is being posted on YouTube too, so let me know if you're watching this. Let me know in the comments section and all of that, or just leave a comment on the podcast. So, but yeah, we have a lot of tournaments to talk about. We had GP Ghent. Of course, I record this Sunday night, so we had GP Ghent that just started up, or that just finished, excuse me. So let's take a look. The winning decks were Wurza, and Jund. And there was only one control deck in the top 4, because they do top 4 at team tournaments. So let's take a look at this Jeskai control deck by Brent Voss. Let's take a look. So 4 Snaps, 4 Spellquiller, 4 Stoneforge, Jace Teferi, a Batter Skull, Bolt Helix, Manly. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty stock for what you want to do if you're playing Jeskai. Interesting that Brent decided to play Sword of Fire and Ice over Sword of Feast and Famine. So maybe potentially trying to see about Burn. That could be a concession to Burn. The sideboard was 2 Abrade, 2 Alpine Moon, 1 Ashiok Dreamrender, 1 Batter Skull, 1 Purge, 1 Disdainful Stroke, 1 Engineered Explosive, 2 Force Negation, 1 Gideon Ally of Zendikar. I like Gideon Ally of Zendikar against Jund. That card is very good as long as they don't just snap kill it, which they probably will try to do. Magmatic Sinkhole and 1 Timely Reinforcements. This deck is sweet. I do like this deck. The Spell Queller plan is very good, especially with Teferi Time Raveler, because of course, if they end up killing the Spell Queller with a Teferi on the battlefield, they do not get to resolve the card that was under Spell Queller. So that is a little 1-2 punch that I do really, really like right now. 2 Spell Snares. I've been loving 3 Spell Snares. I know that this is Jeskai, so it's a little bit different, and he's got the Lightning Helixes and the Lightning Bolts. But, man, 3 Spell Snares was great for me today. But liking the 2 as well. Other than that, we have some Jund. We have Stoneforge Urza. We have Dredge, Burn, Mardu Shadow. Bant Stoneblade, which it's not. don't get your hopes up. This is not a control deck. This is like Snow Herder, basically, without the herders. Playing Ice Fang, playing Noble Hierarchs. This is not a control deck, really. This is just kind of a creature deck that is playing just a bunch of green Birds of Paradise and Mana Dorks and things like that. So when I saw Bant Stoneblade, I was like, oh, this must be sick. This is going to be like, what are we splashing? Oh, we're doing the creature thing. Oh, okay. So definitely not what I expected. And then just out of top 8, we had the triple Wurza team. Oh my gosh. That team was Peter Golgowski's team. So, he's a Pro Tour regular. Then we have Titan Shift, Wurza, Jund all on a team. Then Dredge, Jund, Eldrazi-tron. Eldrazi-tron's still kicking. Still around. Still got to be ready for it. And then in 8th place, and they cut to top 4, if you were unaware, at team tournaments. But in 8th place, we had a team of Temur Kiki, and Titan Shift. This Temur Kiki deck, this could see play because, the net decks and whatnot. So let's take a look. 3 Deceiver Exarch, 3 Kiki Jiggies, 2 Pestermaya, 3 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Jace, 4 Wrenn and 6, 1 Abrade, 4 Cryptic Commands, the full play set of Cryptic Commands, 2 Force Negations, 4 Bolts, 1 Magmatic Sinkhole, 2 Remand, 4 Serum Visions, 2 Spell Snares. So, this deck seems pretty sick, actually. Looks pretty great. Really, the only thing they're splashing green for is Wrenn and 6, too. So, being able to buy back lands and kill 1-drops, pretty important, I would assume, for this Arnaud Jacom. Sorry if I butchered the name. But yeah, that is Temur Kiki. So that deck seems sick. That's something that I dig, a good Kiki deck. In 10th place at Ghent, we had a team who was playing Blue-White Control, Grixis Shadow. So let's take a look at this Blue-White Control deck. Arnaud Hockamiller. Sorry if I butchered the name. The deck list is traditional control, so we got 3 Snaps, 3 Jace, 2 Narsets, 2 Teferi Heroes, and 2 Teferi Time Ravelers, 3 Cryptics, 1 D-Sphere, 3 Force, 2 Logic Knock, 4 Opt, 1 Oust, 4 Path, 2 Snares, 2 Verdicts, 1 Timely. So pretty traditional stuff here. You could argue 2 Jace, 3 Jace, and then, of course, Teferi's been in and out of the control decks as of late. I still think in traditional control, at least one of. I'm still liking one of in the traditional control decks. His teammate was playing the exact same list, Julian Style. So they played the exact same list. So that's sweet. Getting them to 10th place. Good showing for Blue-White. You can't be mad at that. The deck that was sweeping the tournament, and I mean just everybody was talking about it. Channel Fireball did a write-up of it, and a little 1 minute, they do like the 1 minute deck text, was Blue-Red Breach. So this is a Blue-Red deck that wants to, through the Breach, Emrakul, Aeon's Torn. So 4 Emrakul, and the full play set. Love it. 4 Snapcaster Mage. That's it for the creature's main deck. 3 Jace, 3 Abrade, 4 Cryptic, 4 Bolt, 4 Opt, 4 Remand, 3 Spell Snare, 4 3 the Breach. So that's all the spells. So the deck is super sick. I love, and I think I said this like in the very first episode of the podcast, I love sneaking in Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. That is one of my favorite things to do in Magic. So I am here for this deck. This is a sweet control deck that just happens to kill you with Emrakul. Very cool. Very cool. I wonder, though, the win percentage without Emrakul. Like, if you can't assemble the 2-card combo, that's a big problem with this deck, is Emrakul does literally nothing if you don't have Through the Breach, and vice versa. Through the Breach does nothing. You're breaching in a Snapcaster Mage, which is not good. I played this deck a little bit way back in the day, and it was sweet. The deck is very, very cool. Then down the line, we've got right under them, another Blue-White. Pretty stock. All the usual spells. Actually, it's the same exact main deck as the one I said before. So they're all playing that traditional deck there. Then we have Jeskai Stoneblade in 13th. This is 4 Snap, 4 Spell Queller, 4 Stoneforge, 2 Jace, 3 Teferi Time Raveler, Batterskull, Bolts. Yeah, this is Spell Pierce. That's interesting. Okay. And Sword of Feast and Famine. Again, I do like Sword of Feast and Famine more than Sword of Fire and Ice. Something about the swords, too, that you should really take into consideration. Worry about the effect versus the colors that it gives you protection from. The effect of the sword is way more important than what you're going to be protected from. Because in a control deck, typically you want to being able to untap all of your lands and making them discard a card is, there's nothing better than that. If it's like draw a card, I guess, if you got to untap your lands. But untapping your lands is insane. I know that Sword of Fire and Ice does let you draw a card, but being able to, you won't be able to use it most of the time. So yeah, being able to untap your lands is huge. So that is a lot of the decks from, it's about down to 15th place. So all the control decks and stuff from GP Ghent, which was, of course, as I said, a team tournament. So take that for what it is. Still pretty valuable stats and information. But, it is a team tournament. So I'm going to shift gears over to the SCG Classic, because the Open was Legacy, so we're not going to talk about the Legacy Open. But taking a look at the Open, Control had a rough time. So they posted the top 16 deck lists, and I was very excited. I was very excited to see these lists tonight whenever I was making the show notes and everything. Not one blue-white Stoneblade, and there was 0 control decks in the top 16. So that's pretty disheartening. If you are listening to this podcast, you're a fan of Control. So yeah, first place Anderson Leclerc took it down with Mono Green Tron. Boo. So, and then Grixis Death Shadow, Amulet Titan, Devoted Devastation. So that was the deck that I was practicing this whole week. Didn't end up, again, couldn't pull the trigger on it. Then we had 4-color Wurza. We had Amulet Titan, Titan Shift, and Mono Green Tron to round out the top 8. Yeah, and there is more of the same. There was a Mardu Death Shadow, Bant Stoneblade, but that was more of a creature kind of deck. We had Azorius Spirits, Mono White Stoneblade. So a lot of not control. What does that mean for us moving forward? Well, it only clouds, I think, in my mind, like what position. Because there is, at this point, in Modern, there is a fork in the road. And I've said this before. I think that both Control and Stoneblade can exist in the same format, kind of like Legacy, how there's a Stoneblade deck and there's a Miracles deck. Most people would tell you that the Stoneblade deck is the better deck in Legacy. Is that true in Modern? That remains to be seen. But I think that both of these decks can exist. It really, really is up to us, the players, to figure out. And that's what this entire podcast is about, to share information, to convey the thoughts. I don't just come on the episode and just say what I'm thinking. These are thoughts and conversations I've had with other people. So it really is up to us to try and decide. And of course, it's up to your play style. If you're more comfortable just sitting behind, counter spells and not doing anything for the first couple turns, and you don't feel comfortable playing Stoneforge Mystic, go get my Batter Skull, and be willing to hold that mana up and take those first couple turns off setting up, by all means, keep fighting the good fight with Control. I tried Stoneblade today. I liked it. The Batter Skull, let me tell you, Batter Skull is the most messed up equipment. I don't have to tell you that. You already know that. That card is insane. It single-handedly won me a game against Burn today. Like, card's insane. Very good, very good. Highly recommend. But yeah, it's up to us. So if you want to get at me on Twitter, we can talk about it. And I'm definitely open to sharing my trade secrets. I talk with Francesco Amati a lot. He's definitely helping me out make card decisions. Talking with Tony Johnson, he's a master of control. He actually went 5-2 today at the at the MCQ, so shout out to him. But yeah, where are you at? I am still frustrated with Modern. I think I'm just gonna stick with Stoneblade and learn it, right? Play it, get my reps in. Like Joey Pasco and me were chopping it up on Twitter. Just pick a deck, man. And that's what he told me. Pick a deck, get your reps in, and by the time the format is but settled, you'll have your reps and you'll be a master with Stoneblade. Because the funny thing about it is I haven't played with Stoneforge Mystic in a blue, like in a control, like a Callblade style deck since Callblade, right? Like way back in the day, we had Callblade in Standard, and that was the last time I played with it until today. So a lot of questions on the horizon, but I think that if we just get our reps in with whatever deck we choose, it's going to work out. And it's going to be great. And I do think that both of these decks are well positioned. We have a fine matchup. Not great, but a fine matchup against John, which is personally, I think, one of the best decks. We have a fine deck matchup against Burn. It's very winnable. Batter Skull. Or if you're playing Control, if you're playing traditional Control and not Stoneblade, I highly, highly recommend playing at least one Timely Reinforcements. I'm seeing a lot online, people skimping on the Timelies. You got to play them. I've been a huge proponent of Timely in the main for even before the Hogak Menace. St. Louis, which is where I'm from, is very, very burn heavy meta. So I've always been rocking at least one in the main deck. And then Wurza I think is winnable. We got Stonies. And you could play Wear Tear if you're playing Jeskai. That's another thing too, is if I think that both Jeskai Stoneblade, Blue-White Stoneblade, Jeskai Control, and Blue-White Control, they're all viable right now. Play whatever you want. Just get your reps in. That was my issue the last couple of weeks. I didn't know what to play. If you just lock in on a deck and get your reps in, it's way better than going into a tournament and not having your reps in. Because Modern is and always has been a format where if you know your deck better than your opponent and you know your matchups better than your opponent, you're going to do better than your opponent. I know it's shocking. It's shocking, really. But yeah, I mean, that is pretty much everything I wanted to get off my chest. Again, I've been very frustrated with Magic recently, losing that winning in and just audibling in Dallas. I was going to play Twiddlestorm. I had a week's practice with the deck. I was very, very comfortable with the deck. And then literally at the last second, I was about to fill my deck list out. My friend convinced me to play Tron, and I played against 3 consecutive burn decks, and they literally went Mountain, Goblin Guide, Attack, Reveal No Land, and I was done. I lost all 3 matches because it's a really rough start. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I know it's kind of a different episode, kind of me just talking and a little less structure than normal, but these episodes I think are nice, and I like the kind of free. This is a bit of a throwback episode. If you go back and listen to the earlier episodes, it's kind of just me talking. I dig these kind of episodes. It's a little bit less structured, and obviously I don't have someone to bounce ideas off of, but let me know. Let me know if you dig this kind of show. I can do more of these for sure. I definitely don't need someone in on the podcast every single episode, but if you dig these kind of episodes, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at LessAlex. Let me know if you dig this kind of episode. Let me know if you dig the podcast, or if you're just trying to talk about Magic. We can talk about Magic. But yeah, thanks for the awesome sponsorship to Team Solitary Pro. I appreciate it. They help me do what I do and bring the kind of content to you that I do. So big shout out to Team Solitary Pro. I will put their Twitter information in the description below, and you can go and follow them as well. Remember, if you do dig this content, go on over to Apple Podcasts. Again, you don't need an account or anything. You don't need an Apple Podcast account to just give me a 5-star review, say a couple of kind words about the podcast. And you have no idea how much it means to me whenever I get a comment on a YouTube video or on the Apple Podcasts thing saying, hey, it was great, I love the show, or whatever, It's awesome to see that, and that is what keeps me going, those kind words. But yeah, make sure to follow. Tell your friends. That's another thing. Tell your friends about the podcast, because if they don't know, then they don't know, and it's just the easiest way, word of mouth. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the Control Freak podcast. But everybody, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to me gab for 35 minutes. I appreciate everyone. Where does Control go from here? It's up to us. It's up to us to decide and to figure it out. I am pretty confident that we will figure it out, though. And until next time, until next week, be kind to one another, Magic players. Have a great night.